So we've been looking at the image of God in man. And today I'm going to give you two more ways that the Bible describes the image of God in man. First, it means that we are like God. And you see this in Genesis 1, 26 through 27. So along with uniqueness and the dominion, the image of God means that we are like God. First, let me say that we are not God or even little gods. There's a theology out there called the little gods theology that is being peddled by those in the Word of Faith movement and the New Apostolic Reformation movement, or the NAR. These are groups you want to stay away from. They teach that humans are little gods or can become a god, which is contrary to Scripture. We don't want anything to do with it. It's wrong teaching. It's false teaching. So stay away from that. So let's look at what Scripture actually does say. What is taught in Scripture about the image of God and how we are like God? First, man was created in God's image. In his image, what does that mean? Well, turn over to Genesis 5, 1 through 3. Here's what it says. This is the book of the generations of Adam, which is, let me stop there for a minute. This is another chapter, a heading within Genesis. There's different chapters or books within the book of Genesis itself, and this is the beginning of another one. And it says, this is the book of the generations of Adam. When God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. Male and female, he created them, and he blessed them and named them man when they were created. When Adam had lived 130 years, he fathered a son in his own image, in his own likeness, after his image, and named him Seth. So we see that Adam had a son that was in his image and likeness. Was Seth a clone of Adam? I mean, were they exactly the same? No. Seth was his own person, but he did carry many of Adam's attributes. If Seth worked really hard, could he become Adam? No. Seth would always remain different from Adam, but yet similar. The image of God means that mankind is like God, but not necessarily a clone of God, or that they ever become a God themselves. It means that we have certain attributes that God has. We call these in theology the communicable attributes of God, because he has shared them with us. There's a quote from the Ligonier website, which says, when we speak of God's communicable attributes, we are referring primarily to his moral attributes, such as love, goodness, and kindness. In one sense, we must not forget that there is a basic incommunicability of even these attributes. For insofar as such things as the love and goodness of God are infinite, we cannot imitate them. Nevertheless, because we bear God's image, there is a manner in which we exhibit these attributes by way of analogy. For example, the kind of love we have as creatures is not identical to the kind of love our Creator possesses. However, at the same time, our love is not wholly dissimilar, such that there is no point of contact whatsoever with the love of God. What else does this mean, the image of God mean? It means in the way that we are like God is that we are individuals but one. See, in verse 27 it says, in the image of God he created him, male and female he created them. We find here that part of the image of God is that man was created male and female. In chapter 2 we find out how God did this, but we see an interesting point here. The male and female of man reflects who God is. God created Adam, and he created a male Adam, and he created a female Adam. Ligon Duncan said this about this idea. It seems then that God's creating of man as male and female is reflective of the fact that God is personal. As God, the triune God, is eternally in personal fellowship, so also man is created as a personal being, male and female. We are complementary. We need one another. And so the very differentiation of the sexes, male and femaleness, to stress the personalness of ourselves as human beings is part of the image of God. You see, male and female, two but one, two different ways of expressing humanness, but yet still human, still one. Another thing that the image of God means for people is that we have value. The image of God gives us value. And you see that in Genesis 1:26 through 27. Because we possess the image of God, we as humans have a very high value. Every human life is stamped with the image of God and therefore ought to be treated as such. In fact, the image of God gives ultimate value to humans. Turn to Genesis 9:5 through 6. This is the story of Noah after he left the ark. God is blessing Noah, and then he tells Noah that he requires a reckoning when a human is killed. If an animal or a human kills another human, then the one that is killed must die. It doesn't say if a lion kills an antelope, then you must kill the lion. It doesn't say that. But if that same lion kills a human, then it must die. This shows the highest value of life is human life. And why is it the highest value? Because Genesis 9:6, God made man in his own image. See, the reason why that lion had to die is because God had made man in his own image. The image of God not only gives us the highest value, but it also gives us a reason to give and to think about human rights, to think about rights at all. John David said the biblical teaching concerning the image of God has important implications for contemporary issues, such as human rights, the sanctity of human life, bioethics. The concept of the image of God has been foundational in Western civilization for the institutions and practices of human rights and democracy. When Thomas Jefferson wrote in the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, the background of his thought was this fundamental teaching of the first chapter of Genesis. Human beings are not, in fact, equal in ability, gifts, education, or achievement, but are equal in view of their common creation to be image bearers of God. The political scientist John Hallowell has pointed out that the modern world, having lost sight of this crucial biblical truth, has in fact no basis for believing that all men are equal, no firm basis for human rights that are anything more than creation of human societies. End quote. So you see, the reason why we can talk about human rights, the reason why we can even fight for those, is because Genesis chapter 1 is true, that we have been created and stamped with the image of God. Otherwise, talking about rights and all those kinds of things are just based on the majority. And what kind of argument is that? Because the majority changes quite often. And if we're going to base all of our human rights and our value on the majority, then tomorrow you may not be in the majority, and therefore you've lost all value in life. Your life is forfeit because you're not in the majority. But the alternative, that God has created us, and he's created us and stamped us to be image bearers of him, that gives us ultimate value in the creation.